Well, hey, Dave Molenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. As usual, I have a unique thought to start this with, and so today is no different. So I want you to think about two words that would really make or break your business. Now, when you think of that, I think you're going to think of things like sales and marketing. You're going to think of things like profit and loss. You're going to think about things like maybe leadership development. But I have two words that are going to absolutely kill your business if you don't handle it right, or it's going to take you to the next level. So I'm honored and excited to be hanging out with Anne Donovan. How are you today?
Good morning, Dave. I am well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So you're the principal consultant of Donovan HR Solutions. So fill us in on what's going on at Donovan HR Solutions these days.
I'm a one-stop shop of human resources for small to medium-sized businesses.
Okay.
Typically, businesses don't need full-time HR until they have about 50 employees because that's when all of the employment laws kick in.
Okay.
Um, but I like to work with the small businesses. It's because I'm a small business owner myself, and
Sure.
I know what it's like to wear so many different hats. But I also realize that it's great to hire the experts so I can get them to do the work. So that's why small to medium-sized businesses call me, because I'm the HR expert to help them with all their people needs.
That's awesome. And so often HR gets forgotten, right? I mean, it's one of those things that, well, I can do that part-time or we don't need that. So it's crazy because the H part is human, which is like what our team consists of. So I don't want people to have to wait anymore because they're anxiously wondering all around the world right now, what are these two words? And the two words are actually employee retention. And I was shocked, right? I was so shocked to look at this. And I have a statistic, and I know we can, use these to our advantage or disadvantage, but I have one that I found for 2023, and I wanted to get your take on it because I found that 75% of the US workforce has no intention of staying at their jobs for more than 5 years. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. And that costs like $1 trillion a year right now. So, for the people that are like, nah, employee retention, I'm fine. My people are going to stay forever. Just know that the research shows that 3 out of 4 of your people will be gone in 5 years. Are you kind of experiencing that, Anne, or what's your take on that?
I am definitely experiencing that. And a lot of my career has been in hospitality,
Okay.
which has experienced higher
Oh, yeah.
turnover than just that 75% leaving within 5 years.
Yeah. Wow.
So
That's nuts.
definitely
So I
experienced
think
it.
it's interesting because you said your mission is actually to increase employee retention. So your whole mission is for the Donovan HR solution side is to really work on increasing that. So for somebody listening that maybe hasn't thought of that before, or maybe they've kind of just said, this is just part of my job. I mean, like you said, in the hospitality side, it's got to be even higher thinking who's going to be there. I mean, they're looking for somebody for the next shift, let alone out 5 years, right? Are they wondering, is someone going to show today? How do you help companies with that for the people that haven't really thought of that beforehand?
I like to dive right in and conduct a full assessment of all of the company's human resources practices because each individual piece of human resources can affect employee retention.
Okay,
I look at the recruiting piece. What do your job postings say? Are they a true reflection of the company and the values? Are they enticing people to apply? What does the interviewing process look like? Are you
sure,
just
sure.
saying, yep, come right in? Or are you doing a thorough assessment of the individual? What does onboarding look like? And then training and development, your employee relations, all the way to your offboarding practices. And when I work with a company, I'll look at that full assessment to really hone in on the areas of the highest need and the highest impact. And then I'll work with the leadership on creating best practices to increase that retention.
Gotcha. And I'm guessing, Anne, that there's a lot of blind spots in what you just said, because I'm thinking, again, the average entrepreneur around the world listening, thinking, oh, it's a job post, big deal, right? Onboarding is, here's your desk, here's the password to your computer, there's your parking spot, and there's the restroom key, right? So what else is there in onboarding, right? You know, and it's just crazy because the research shows bad onboarding equals, again, the lack of employee retention. And each one of those topics that you talked about are definitely a whole podcast within themselves. There's different reasons. If what I'm taking away from what you just said, there's different reasons for people to leave. And we owe it to our company, to our team, and to that person to try to really improve each step along the way. Do you see a lot of resistance there at first from people? Do you get a lot of those people, I'm fine, I don't need to work on that, or are people pretty receptive at that point?
Dave, you hit that nail on the head. It's people are resistant because people don't like change,
Yep.
but change is a necessary part of running a small business.
Right.
And understanding that the employees are changing. So what worked 5 years ago isn't going to work today. And I like what you said about the onboarding because that's what it looks like in a lot of
Right.
companies is here's
Yep.
your desk, here's a laptop, and the onboarding uh, process for a lot of employees determines if they're going to stay or leave.
Yeah.
And 25% of employees will quit within the first 6 months because of the onboarding experience.
Something that we had control over, right? That's the hard thing, right? I mean, if you lose them to a competitor, if you lose them because they're disinterested, whatever. But man, for something that I have control over, that's where I really struggle when my clients lose people. And then I say, how'd the onboarding go? Well, I took them to lunch. I mean, it's like, my gosh, really? I mean, So do you have a pretty extensive onboarding process that you guys use at Donovan HR Solutions?
Well, I tailor it to the individual organization that I'm working with
Okay,
because every organization is different.
sure.
But an onboarding process needs to at least include a welcome. Take the employees on the new hires on a tour of the workspace. Have everything set up, have their laptop and all the other technology set up.
Yeah,
Introduce them to the leadership team and the C suite. Get them involved from the get go and assign a mentor, somebody that they can go to, ask
sure,
questions. Hey, I just ran into this. How did you handle it? Type of thing.
sure.
And
Gotcha.
setting up that mentor program shows, well, studies show can really lengthen the employee retention.
So is that mentor hopefully somebody different than a leader, I'm guessing? Is it more of a, equal, I hate all this word and jargons, but kind of somebody equal, right, to them? It's somebody outside of their leadership team, I'm hoping. Is that ideal, do you think?
That's it exactly, Dave. It's pairing them up with a buddy who is a peer to them. So if they're an
Sure.
individual contributor, find another individual contributor. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on the same team or in the same department, but studies show that having that mentor system or buddy system from the very beginning strengthens the employee experience.
That's great. I mean, we're so interested in the customer experience now, and it's interesting when I wrote Growing on Purpose, my book, we really talked about the connection between a strong team creates a strong customer experience. So if you're having a weak customer experience, it's probably because you have a weak team. And some of the things that Anne's talking about right here, it starts from the day that you post your job. And, we use Disc a lot, and we utilize that for, I can tell a person ahead of time what their personality and what their strengths are going to be. So what we try to do is look at it and say, hey, if the job could talk, what would it say that it needed? I need somebody that's a team player. I need somebody that's good to be able to work a while by themselves, whatever it is. We can kind of, and I hate the word profile, but we're using it. We can profile that person, to be able to say, hey, this job needs this, and this person, they align really well. So, it starts way at the beginning. And I guess I wish that people would think of it that way, because I've seen people come for the first day and not have a laptop. Well, go get your own laptop or go pick one out. It's like, well, what am I doing day one? I mean, it like you said, I love that you set this up, because if it was a customer coming in, we would then, roll out the red carpet. We try to have a great experience for them, hopefully. So do you see people treating customers better, unfortunately, than team members in a lot of these cases?
They do. And growing up, I was always taught the customer is always right.
Yep.
I'm sure that you've heard that.
Yep.
And as I grew up in my hospitality career, I started realizing the customer is not always right, and that we need to start treating the employees as good or better
Yeah.
than the customers. And I apologize to all my customers out there, because they it's we need leadership, we need employees, we need customers to make the business world go round. And I don't think that any one is more important than the other. It's a trifecta that all works together.
Yep.
And if you increase employee retention and have a focus on the employee experience, you'll increase customer retention too.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
So,
Yep. And
mhm.
that's so, that's a lot of companies. That's what we're all about, is customer retention. We want to keep customers. We want to sell more to customers. It's way easier to sell, something to an existing customer than to a new customer. So a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners around the world have their focus on the customer. Some of them are equally having their focus on the team, which then that is a way more successful model, like you said, than to do it at the expense of the team. And so if you're listening and that this might be a huge blind spot, because I've run into plenty of entrepreneurs that say, you know what, customer is first, team is second, or actually it's customer, company, and team, right? They kind of put these three in this descending order. And it's like, how in the world did the team get to be on the bottom, right? And maybe back in the day, when if one guy quit, there's 5 or 6 guys, or a girl quit, there's 5 or 6 girls waiting for that position. That's not really the case anymore.
It is not.
There's more jobs than people, from what I'm understanding. Are you running into that right now still?
Absolutely. So the August Bureau of Labor Statistics came out, and unemployment's at 3.8%.
Okay.
The country considers 4% at full unemployment. So everybody has a job, wants a job, needs a job, is
Yeah.
working. But with lower than 4%, there are more jobs than people. So rather than saying that there are no workers out there, nobody wants to work, no, we need to take a different look at it, in that we need to increase employee retention and hold on to the employees that we have.
Yeah.
And then we don't need to spin our wheels with recruiting
Yeah.
and onboarding and turnover.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the amazing thing, is I'm sure there's people listening right now that are like, well, there's a guy on my team I don't want, right? Because he's not engaged, or she's not engaged, or whatever, right? So I
Mhm.
think that's different, it's up to the individual where this line is drawn. I'm thinking that most of your team, you either want to keep or you want to train into a better team member, right? There's a chunk of people that, yeah, you just don't really want to have. They're disengaged, they're actively disengaged, and they're trying to take other people with them. So totally makes sense. The second part of that research said that 87% of HR managers considered employee retention as a top priority. So it's interesting because I feel like it's penetrating the HR side of the world. But like you said, your uh, you know, companies with under 50 people tend to not have an HR person, right? Or an HR department, or it's Sally's hat, it's Sally's day to be the HR person, She was not there that day they voted, and so she's now the HR person. But in your world, like 9 out of 10 HR people are saying that employee retention is a top priority. Does that kind of align with what you're seeing around the country?
It is. When I talk to other HR practitioners, we're all talking about employee retention. And it's changed so much in the past 2 years, 3 years, because people aren't staying at jobs for 35 years anymore.
Yeah.
Pensions aren't around as much as they used to be. The one company offers me a 4% match, but then I can jump to another company to get the 6% match on my 401k. And so as the labor market changes and the workforce changes, companies need to change with that. And I'm really excited about what I've been seeing recently with the focus on employee retention and
Okay.
creating a great employee experience so that we can hold on to those employees for longer than 5 years.
Yeah. Wow. And again, so I want to jump in after the commercial break. I want to talk about like some of the tips for somebody that's listening, because I'm guessing that this might be a newer topic for them. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Awesome. So cool. So I'm thinking here that again, people now we've piqued their interest, because again, you can't look at these statistics. You can, but I would highly suggest you don't look at these and say this doesn't apply. Because again, if you have, let's say you have 10 people on your team, technically 7.5 of them will not be there in 5 years. And that turnover price is so expensive, from what you have in training costs, in acquiring that person, in quite frankly, the customer's experience gets compromised significantly. So if you're going to see a turnover every so often, I would be like, how can I stop that? So what tips do you have for people that are listening that want to improve their custom or their team employee retention? What would you suggest for them?
Dave, thank you so much for asking, because this is the really good work that I get to do. And when I do start working with organizations and do that full assessment, there's a lot that companies can do. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I can't pay anymore. In, Companies do need to pay fairly, equitably, and competitively. But yes, money is finite, especially if you have a small, medium-sized business. So you do need to take a look at salary and benefits. Just make
Sure.
sure that they're competitive.
Hmm.
Make sure that the benefits that you offer are what the employees want and they're taking advantage of. I worked at a company that thought adding pet insurance would be a great benefit, but nobody took advantage of it. So that leads me into the second piece is lines of communication, opening up those lines, making sure that employees have somebody that they feel comfortable talking to when something goes wrong.
Sure.
It's conducting periodic one-on-ones, whether that's weekly, it's monthly, just having the managers and employees with those one-on-ones, conducting stay interviews. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about exit interviews that you conduct when an employee is leaving, but
Sure.
by then it's too late. So
Yep.
conduct stay interviews while the employee is still there. Find out what they think about their job and what could get better, what could change. And you don't have to change everything based upon employee feedback, but employees just want to be heard.
Right. Wow. That's cool. Can we kind of look at that stay interviews? Because that's new. That's a new term for me. I love that. So, somebody's listening and they have 10 people again. We're going to use the 10 people thing. And they conduct their interview at the beginning. And then if they're somewhat creative, they try to do an exit interview to figure out what they did wrong or what could be done better the future. So, but you're saying, hey, why not during their tenure working there? Why not conduct a stay interview? I feel like people are they're so afraid, Anne, of what they're gonna find, right? They think that no news is good news. It's kind of like, hey, if my teeth don't hurt, I'm not going to the dentist, right? And so until all of a sudden something hurts, and then they find out it's a disaster. So, are there some questions? Are there some things that we're looking for in that stay interview? I'd really like to get some understanding of what that looks like.
Yes. And the stay interview doesn't have to be long and drawn out.
Okay.
It's I have a list of 15 questions that I ask, but it
Okay.
doesn't have to, not every stay interview has to be those 15 questions.
Okay.
But ask about salary and benefits. Do they feel that they are being paid fairly? Are the benefits that are offered beneficial?
Okay.
Did you receive training for your job? Or what could be different with the training you received?
Okay.
Because a lot of times they're showing their laptop in the desk and then saying, good luck.
Yep. Yep.
But with the training in their current job, what do they think of it? What could be done differently? Especially if we have a new hire coming in, let's make sure that their training is up to snuff so that they want to stick around.
Gotcha. Okay.
Are they
Cool.
interested in career development?
Oh, great.
And if so, as a manager, what can I do to help you with that career development? Now, in small companies, there may not be promotions available, but you can develop employees to get ready for if a promotion becomes available or when it becomes available.
Sure. Okay. Wow.
And then what is your relationship like with your supervisor?
Okay.
And surprisingly, I've worked in some large organizations, and some employees said, I don't even know who my supervisor is. So
Who
building
do I report
that,
to here?
I know. It's like I just show up and do what the other
Yeah,
people are
exactly.
doing.
Well,
And
if I don't show up, what happens? I don't even know, right?
exactly.
Okay. Well, and those seem to be those that line of questioning, Anne, and maybe it's just semantics, but it feels like a really good performance review. I mean, it feels like it would be a review process. I worked with a company or work with a company that they had somebody on their staff that he was almost 60, and he said, I've never in my life had a review. We were doing a review for the guy. It was like the first time ever, and he was like so appreciative,
Mhm.
that somebody took the time to listen. And I think that that's like so much of this is, like you said, is that voice being heard. And I feel like we as entrepreneurs, we're just so darn afraid that they're going to say, like you're talking about salaries and benefits. They're afraid that somebody's going to want to get, we go to the extreme. Well, what if they want to double what they're making per hour, right? Or triple what I mean, we conjure up these ideas, and then we think because of that, we're not going to do anything. And I think that's where the pain comes in. And that, quite frankly, is why employee turnover is so high, because they
Mhm.
want to be heard. Most employees understand that there's limits to this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
How do you calm those fears for somebody that might be listening that's having that in their head right now?
And I completely understand the fear. It's the fear of the unknown, the fear that they do want to double their salary. But that's an excellent opportunity to explain the business to the employees and really get their buy-in. It's we have a large CapEx project coming up that we need to focus the funds on, so we can't give you a raise right now. But what if we find some development that we can do? So getting the employees involved in the business and understanding the business,
Yeah.
you're going to have to tell employees no. But as long as you explain the reasoning behind it, employees, as you said, are so much more appreciative of that rather than the radio silence with, oh no, I'm afraid that I won't be able to give them a raise and I'm just going to avoid them.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
is the absolute wrong thing to do. Your employees will go find somebody that will explain the business to them.
Yeah.
They'll
Absolutely.
join your competitor.
Well, and that's the thing. So nothing gets said at the office. So they go home and then right away they start saying, man, I don't like my job. Right. It
Hmm.
doesn't have anything to do with what I do. I like what I do. I like the team, but there's a discrepancy here for whatever reason. And right
Hmm.
away, the spouse is like, well, let's go find something else. Right. I mean, that's like the first thing a lot of times, rather than going back to your existing employer and just having that discussion. People in today's world, I mean, I remember my grandpa, he worked at the Plankington Meat Factory downtown Milwaukee for like his whole life. And he was so proud of that, right? And that's what he did for 50 years. And he was so proud that he was able to keep that job through all the time, the tough times that they had. I mean, now they said the average person's career has 15 different jobs, which
Hmm.
basically aligns with our 5 year, because average career is probably 45 years from 20 to
Exactly.
65, roughly, right? And it
Right.
takes every 5 years, there's this turnover. I just don't
Mhm.
want that to happen. If you want it to happen, that's fine. If you don't want it to happen, though, we are able to, work on this stuff. And like Ann said, there's these questions, there's topics, and just one of them was financial. The salary and benefits is one, but training improvement, career development, relationships with your leadership. Those are other things that don't necessarily cost money but will allow people to stick around. And quite frankly, I don't want someone just showing up every day, sticking around. I love the engaged employee where their thought process is, how can I improve myself? How can I improve the team? How can I improve the company? I mean, there's just a constant moving forward. So I feel like there's this chunk of people that aren't necessarily, I think they call it what, quiet quitting, where they're not necessarily quitting, but they're like happy that, hey, I didn't have to do anything at all today. And I spent the whole day, got paid. I didn't do nothing. It was awesome. And it's like,
Hmm.
man, for a leader, those are the words of death to a company. So,
Yeah.
um, do you agree that a lot of this stuff doesn't have to cost money in order to be effective for employee retention?
Absolutely not. And I've always run my departments under budget because you can have such an impact on the employee experience without spending a lot of money. And the biggest thing an employer can do with a high impact is recognition.
Yeah,
Thank your employees for going above and beyond for that customer. Thank your employees for helping out a teammate with a really hard project.
yeah,
So, a sincere thank you doesn't cost anything.
right.
And the stay interviews doesn't cost anything. Opening up those lines of communication, giving
Yeah,
your employees a performance review, letting them know what they're doing well, letting them know where they need to improve
yeah.
doesn't cost much.
Wow. I mean, it's recognition to me is one of those silent things. It's kind of like that secret thing that not a lot of people know about. And I think about like when as a citizen we drive. So we live out in the country, and so I jump on my motorcycle and I can be within 10 minutes, like just in the middle of farm fields, right? And so when I'm out on a beautiful day and it's like 90 degrees, it's just perfect. And I'm cruising along and I look up ahead and I see that there's a town there, and I see I'm going 55 and I see a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign there. There's always a cop right there, right? He's sitting there. And never once, Ann, has he ever pulled me over and said, "Hey, Dave, just want to thank you for doing the speed limit," right? That doesn't happen. And so we take that law enforcement to the level in our companies where, why should I thank you for doing a good job? Or why should I thank you for doing your job? You know, we have that mentality. No one's ever thanked me for doing, you get all this kind of kickback from that. And I'm like, you don't have to do any of it. But just realize that the companies that are recognizing their team members, there's a waiting list for them of people to get into that company. And so like you said, it doesn't even cost anything. I mean, we always think, what do we have to do? It's like, why not just come up to somebody and be specific and be intentional and be right on point and say, "Wow, Sally, I just heard you on the phone with XYZ company. I just wanted to say you handled that so well. Keep that up." I mean, that's 5 seconds out of your day. You didn't have to spend a penny. And boy, I tell you what, for the rest of the day, Sally is walking on cloud nine because we caught her doing something right rather than caught her doing something wrong. So I love the fact that you brought up recognition. Are there any recognition pieces? Or is there anything that you've seen work in addition to the words or like just compliments? Is there anything that you guys have seen work from a recognition perspective?
I am still teasing all of that out
Okay.
because every organization is different.
Yep.
And a lot of companies do employee of the month,
Yep.
which employees really appreciate.
Sure.
A lot of companies do service awards. So you've been here for 1 year, here's a
Yep.
pin. You've been here for
Yep.
5. I've seen employees do the summer picnics and the winter banquets.
Yep.
So every company is different, and each company needs to find what works best for
Sure.
them.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So, like, went back to the disc because each individual on your team, we do a lot of disc assessments for the whole team so we can really improve the communication between each other. But what's really interesting from a recognition perspective, and is there's a group of people, you fall into kind of two camps. There's some that prefer private recognition, like they want someone to come up to you, just your leader, and say what we said to Sally. And then there's the public recognition people that want it in the company newsletter, or they want to have an award, there. So you have to really, I found that just recognizing somebody is great. Recognizing them the way they want to be recognized is that much more powerful. And it's interesting because, again, I have people that say, "Please don't tell my group what I did." And I'm like, "Why not?" And they're like, "I don't need that. I'm embarrassed about it. I'm shy, whatever it is," right? But it's just really powerful for leaders to be able to, as best as possible, understand your team. Because the more you understand them, the more powerful that you can design that recognition. So
I love that, Dave.
it works. That's the cool part. And like you said, it's free. I mean, it might cost you a sub sandwich or something once a month, right? Or whatever.
Right.
I mean, if you can't afford a sub sandwich, then you know what? We got other issues. So, but as we start to land today, there was one last statistic that just totally blew me away, and I don't want to ruin this for people, but it said 96% of employees believe blank is important to retain them. And when you think of the word, what word would you put in there? People have all these conjuring, believe that money is important to retain them, status. You come up with all these words. And the word that this research found was empathy. So
Mhm.
96% of employees believe that empathy is important to retain them, which makes it there's leaders right now going, and hey, I'd rather pay money. It's easier for me to give a raise than for me to have to be empathetic for somebody, right? Because we're not taught empathy, right? I mean, I have this thing
No.
that says you want to see their world, you want to communicate understanding, you want to understand their feelings, and it's like, oh yuck, I'm not really on board with that, right? And appreciate them as human beings. I mean, those are like four chunks of empathy. So as we land, I'm just curious from your perspective, how would you address somebody that maybe isn't the most empathetic? Maybe they're a fact and figure type person. They're not a people person, or they're not a touchy feely type. I don't come up to my employees and shake their hand and say great job and blah blah blah. What encouragement would you have for them, understanding that empathy is really incredibly important?
Oh, just the retention statistics, and that 96% of employees will stick around if they have empathetic leaders
Yep.
or empathetic teams.
Yep.
And it's not easy. If you are facts and figures, then
Yep.
I will show you that you have hundreds of thousands of dollars walking out the door every time an employee leaves.
Great
But if you
point.
just understand that Sally has children and needs to leave work every day at 3, or Sally got a call from school and has to take off right then and there, that showing that empathy, you may not have children, but understanding that that's important to her,
Yeah.
understanding what her she may be going through because she has a sick child. And so that really is the facts and figures. If leaders don't show empathy, I've also heard humility is very important.
Hmm.
And then that's dollars walking out the door.
Yep.
So I have it on my calendar, or I've heard of some people wearing a rubber band that they snap, that, oh, I forgot to thank that employee for doing a great job.
Sure.
Um, but there's a lot of tips and tricks, like putting things on your calendar, having a sounding board at the end of the day. It's what worked, what didn't,
Yeah.
to try to build that empathy within leaders.
Yep. Wow. It's so funny because I'm assuming that's where you come in then. So if somebody is listening and they're struggling with that empathy, or, vulnerability is another one of those words that a lot of people are like, I'm not interested in that, right? Which again, I'm not here to tell you how to run your business. We just give you tips from people around the world every week, and you do what you want with them. If somebody is listening and they're struggling with that, is that kind of where Donovan HR Solutions comes in? Would you help them towards understanding the empathy or improve their retention? I'm assuming you come alongside people like that. Is that kind of where you jump in?
Yes. And I have met some resistance for leaders. We just want the quick fix.
Yeah,
Well, most things involving people and change are not quick fixes, but with dedication, hard work, you get the results.
yeah,
And so I work with all leaders, small to medium sized businesses, because I'm on a mission to increase that employee retention. And that's where the full assessment comes in. And if it's the leader whose needs could be the high impact area, then I'll do that development with them.
sure. That's awesome.
Mhm.
So yeah, so if you're listening, you at least have somebody to bounce some ideas off of. And again, most people probably aren't going to want to be vulnerable, which is fine. So the non-vulnerable people won't even call because they'll be like, I'm fine. I don't need this, which is good. But I think if you driving home tonight or whatever, when you're sitting thinking about your day, give it a whirl to think, how is my employee retention? And be kind of, again, blind spots is a big thing because people think they're okay. And I get that, but ask somebody that you trust on your team, ask somebody that knows your company, and ask them that question. I mean, are we empathetic? Are we, vulnerable with people? Are we struggling to retain our team? And it's super easy in today's society, and to blame everybody else, right? I didn't want that employee anyway. They were no good. I'm glad they're leaving. There's always like, we don't want to say, boy, that really hurt. And it hurt so much that I need to now rethink my strategy on employee retention. And so I appreciate all that you've shared today. One last question for you. Tip of the day for somebody that's listening. Maybe it's something that you covered. Maybe it's just something that's on your heart, but I just want you to share what you feel is like a really good tip for somebody listening today.
Treat your employees well and focus on the employee experience, and they will focus on the customer experience.
Wow, that's killer. Yep, absolutely. And I love that because and like we said before, and I'll say it again, it doesn't cost that much. There's plenty of things you can do that don't cost money. And if money is the only stumbling block that you have, then you're kind of out of excuses. Now, time I'll give you, but again, that's why you can talk with, excuse me, Anne, to be able to have her and her team help you. And if somebody is listening in and wants to learn more about you, wants to learn more about Donovan HR Solutions, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Via LinkedIn,
Okay.
and I'm Anne Donovan, SPHR, or on my website at donovanhrsolutions.com.
Awesome. Awesome. This has been so helpful. I love this topic. As I could sit here all day and keep going with it. I want to respect your time and thank you again so much for this. And can't wait to keep learning from you. And until your mission is complete, where there's no more employee migration and employee retention's at 100%, you got some work to do, don't you?
I think I do. And employee retention will never be at 100%.
Right, exactly. So you'll always have something to do. That's awesome. Perfect.
Exactly.
Exactly. Well, thank you again so much for hanging out. And again, can't wait to keep learning from you.
Dave, I cannot thank you enough for having me on. It's been an honor to be a guest of yours.
Awesome.